Welcome to a special episode of Comic Book Wars. Today we are joined with foreign language comic expert Matthew Roybal. Matt, will you please introduce yourself to our audience?
What's up, guys? Define 999 here, aka Matt Roybal. I hesitate to say expert. I think enthusiast probably makes more sense.
Yeah, I don't generally trust self-proclaimed experts, but certainly when others describe you as an expert in your field, that's not done because you're not good at it or because you don't possess a wealth of knowledge. It is a real pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you.
So I have had a couple conversations with you about foreign language comics. As you know, I'm certainly far from versed in foreign language books, but I'm definitely interested in them. And frankly, I'm shocked at the amount of money and the amount of commitment and the amount of excitement that's in this market. The comic market generally, a lot of sophisticated, long-time collectors are describing it as stale. You hear people cry about, the comic market resembling the 1990s. None of those things are occurring in the foreign language market.
No.
It would kind of talk about this market in terms of how it emerged, how you got on the scene, some of the things that were going on behind the scenes at the CGC boards, and some of the things that we've discussed. I find it all fascinating.
Cool. Yeah. None of that kind of old staleness is happening in the foreign market, and it's kind of what drew me to it. I was kind of one of those people that was collecting books, and I was doing the whole buy and flip game, for the better grade. It's almost like I almost felt like a slave to a freaking number at the top of a slab, man. I was losing something. It wasn't the same for me. Now, I grew up in the copper age, so I'm not foreign, pun intended, to, speculation and some of these market dynamics that you feel as a collector can damage the whole experience, because I lived through it. I lived through the crash of the 90s. But in the foreign market, yeah, there's not that at all. In fact, it more closely resembles, I think, the comic market of the late 60s, early 70s, where you had to know people to find stuff. You had to research stuff. You had to kind of really put boots on the ground. It wasn't as simple as just having the money and buying something. And that's what I think is really drawing a lot of collectors to the foreign edition back issue market right now, is that there's kind of a genuineness to it that I think's been lacking in traditional the traditional comic back issue market for a while now. And I think people have been feeling that. Now, it's kind of an interesting, touchy thing when you talk about when did this start and how people got involved. There'll be a lot of collectors that say, "Oh, well, I was collecting foreign editions in the 60s." Well, yeah, you were, but were you actually laser focused on it? That's kind of the difference that's happened within the last, I'd say, decade, maybe decade and a half, is that, at least as far as on the American collector spectrum, they started kind of laser focusing in on foreign editions and kind of leaving the American stuff on the table, so to speak. Let's see. So how did this happen? Well, for me, it happened when I was just perusing eBay and looking for, I think it was a Spider-Man 232, the first black costume. It's 232, isn't it? I'm having a brain fart.
252.
252. Yeah, I was looking for the 252, and I came across this Greek 252, and it looked cool, and I bid on it, and I think I won it for $2. And at that time, I was looking for a 252 for myself, and I just thought it was cool, and it came in the mail, and it was smaller than a normal size comic. I didn't realize that it was digest size, and it just fascinated me, and I started researching it. And I had been at the CGC boards for a while, and I don't know if any of the more modern collectors know that, or more recent collectors, but the CGC boards is sort of like the online hangout of all the top collectors, a lot of top collectors within the hobby. And so I started asking around. I started researching. Couldn't find shit on the internet. Can you cuss on this podcast?
We can do whatever we want.
Okay, so I can get crazy, take my clothes off, and do all
It's
that kind of
happened
stuff.
before. I'm okay with it.
Um, so so as I researched, I figured out there wasn't a whole lot out there, and this was pretty early on. But while at the CGC boards, there were some people that said, "Hey, you need to talk to Lighten 9000 and a guy by the name of Chesperito." And I said, "Well, who are those guys?" So then I went and I contacted those guys and showed them that I had this Greek 252, and they fucking went crazy. Chesperito was calling me. His name is Hector, by the way. I also call him the Patron, aka the Patron. And he was like, "Dude, you got to sell me that book. I need that book. I need that book." Liam, Lighten 9000, hitting me up. "I got to have that book. Got to have that book. I want that book." And everyone else that I showed the book to was like, "Oh, well, that's cool, but whatever." And so I kind of became drawn into this dynamic of these two collectors that were, they had this super hard on for this 252 Greek. Find out over a certain amount of time that they're both building the 252 sets. So, and I'll get to sets for your viewers and listeners a little bit later. But anyway, so basically sets, all the 252s they could find from all over the world. They knew that the Greek existed, but they had never been able to find one. And I found one for $3 in freaking on eBay in the USA. So I tried to work out a deal with these two guys, and Lighten ended up getting the book. I think I traded for like a German 129. But their passion, their initial passion, is what piqued my curiosity. And so Lighten, Liam, and Hector Chesperito sort of took me under their wing, and I was sort of like, their Padawan to their two Jedi Masters. And they, as far as I know, they are the first guys to really say, "Hey, there's something cool here, right?" This book, 129, and of course Spider-Man 300, 252, Secret Wars 8 was another one that another set that they hunted. Um, you know, that's when I realized, I went, "Holy shit!" I started seeing their sets that they were building, and I started seeing the competition between the two. And then I also noticed, just the kind of general lack of interest from the general collecting community at CGC. And for me, as someone that's always kind of walked the path less traveled, that fascinated me. Um, I like doing things that no one else is doing. It's part of my personality. So I kind of got taken under their wing. They started showing me stuff. And they kind of introduced me into this whole world. Okay, so there was this world of foreign comic research, and in normal comic collecting, almost every article you could imagine has been written on American books. Anything you want to learn about pretty much any book is out there. Um, I mean, blogs after blogs after blogs after blogs of debating storylines and all this other shit. I mean, it's all out there. When I started researching the foreign books under these two guys, it really blew me away how little information was out there. Now you've got like the Grand Comics database has gotten really good at having a whole lot of foreign scans and connecting them organically with the American books as well. But back in the day, there was nothing. Back in the day, we would pay money for proof of scans. So I remember Hector telling me about this one time. I think it was Greece. I forget the country, but he would go into forums for these countries. Basically, at that time, the book he was looking for was a 300, and without the lack of information, he basically showed an American book and said, "Hey, man, I'll pay someone. I don't even remember the amount. It might have been $30. If someone can show me this book in Greek, I will PayPal you $30. And so he started talking to me about all those little tricks. So I started doing those little tricks, going to foreign forums, living with Google Translate. Back then, I think Firefox has the built-in Google translation that happens. But back then, I mean, I would live with two screens, and I would just communicate with foreign collectors on the different foreign forums, researching the books, trying to find out what was out there. We didn't even know what existed at that time. So I just kind of fell into that road of doing that. And as I did that, I started showing forums in the CGC forums, and that's when we kind of gained a critical mass of other collectors that were really fascinated by forums and just kind of falling into it. But it was a tiny percentage. I mean, very tiny percentage. But it was in those days that some of the early guys that helped me create FCC magazine um, found each other. We all found each other at the CGC boards. We created these massive PM threads behind the scenes, and we just started doing everything from debating pricing to trying to figure out algorithms to price forums based on Overstreet, um, sharing contacts. That's another thing that in the foreign edition world right now, even still, even though there's a lot more foreign sellers coming to eBay, but contact and source management is huge. Back in the 60s and the 70s, there was no internet. So you had to send lists to dealers. You had to know collectors that would sell or trade or were into the same stuff. You had to mail fucking letters. You don't have to do that anymore today. But that kind of foreign contact management, and I say it sounds cold, source management, foreign management, but it's actually pretty warm because a lot of these sources are amazing collectors in their own right, and you end up becoming good friends with them.
Hey Matt, I don't want
Yeah,
to
sorry.
I don't want to interrupt you,
No, it's
but
okay. Go for it.
I do want to kind of provide like a couple interludes. So
Yes, please do. Sorry, I'm rambling.
that's okay. There's just so much information and so much to talk about. So dovetailing from what you've been discussing, in other words, we've seen um, over the course of the last 10 to 15 years, you would say?
Yeah, I'd say about a decade and a half.
About a decade and a half, this development happened from a very niche market here in the United States to an emerging, robust market where collectors throughout the United States of foreign language comics no longer are in the shadows, but now are like cobbling together lists of other collectors, piecemeal from across the world, begging for photographs of, foreign language comics to really vibrant and robust Facebook groups, for
Yeah,
one.
heck yeah. Social
Now,
media has been huge.
social media has been profound for you, correct? And
Yes, totally.
also, you know, the advent of the work that you've done with Foreign Comic Collector magazine really has changed the game. So, what I think some of our listeners are probably familiar with are books like, what do you get there, buddy?
This is
Oh, there's
Foreign
your
Comic
mag.
Collector magazine. This is issue 2. But yeah, the magazine was pretty big. So yeah, I'll fast forward to that part. So we were behind the scenes at the CGC boards, and I wrote the first article, Foreign Comic Collecting. It's uh, it's comic book collecting with a foreign variant focus. Because back then we were calling them variants. That's wrong. But yeah, so I wrote the first article and created the first thread on 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 like just foreigns in general, not like specific books or specific countries, but a thread at the CGC board so everyone could just come in and share stuff. And then from there, it turned into the magazine. And then from the magazine, we did our first show. I believe FCC Magazine was the first group that ever bought a booth at a comic show and did nothing but show foreigns. We
Wow.
blew minds at IndieCon. I think it was, what year was it? I don't know. It was maybe 7-8 years ago. But me and Tim Bildhauser, and I was going to get to that too. He's another one that we found each other at the CGC boards. Tim is a huge part of this. He's the expert over at CBCS, so he's an expert at the grading company. So Tim, Hector, Liam, me, Ken, David Stuckey, Ken Worthing, David Stuckey, Trent Kloss, the King of Spawn, Ken Worthing's the King of Foreign Cap, Bjorn, Scott McManus, a whole bunch of Tony Pomilla, a whole bunch of hardcore collectors. We debated coming up with the magazine because we were like, do we want to bring more light onto this? Because there's always, as a collector, there's that part of you that's like, I don't know if I want to bring more attention when I'm the one trying to find a lot of this stuff. But we ultimately decided that going the unselfish route, this is the first magazine, that going the unselfish route was actually the way to go, because we knew that this style of collecting was something special and something neat and something that could save a lot of collectors who were going through those doldrums, who were going through those kind of problems with just general collecting in general. And in those days, Nico, you could get Silver Age Mexican keys for as little as $30. I remember Navarro Swamp Thing ones going for 35 fucking bucks. I remember a super nice like Hombre de Hero. So like the Mexican La Prensa Iron Man 1. It's a tough book. We're not quite sure why that one in particular is so difficult and to find. There's one even harder, the Subby from the 1968 books, but it's hard to find. And one popped up for like $80 and I let it go. I was like, another one should pop up at some point in time. And another buying op didn't present itself until like 2 years later, and it was a rag, and it went up to like $150. And I was like, oh man, it's not worth that. I lost it. And then I went like 4 years without a buying op. That's how rare some of these foreigns are. Or no, maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it's more like 2. But I went like 2 years without a buying op, and then finally I found one. But can
I stop you there for a second?
Yes, go ahead.
So one of the things that that really kind of that piqued my curiosity initially was the realization that these foreign language editions were as rare as rare Golden Age books.
Yep. Sure. Period. Depending on the country.
How many came up this year? 1.
Yeah.
None.
Exactly.
2.
Exactly.
That's different than when, like, I was at a convention today in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. It's where I met Jamie Kennedy. For those of you who haven't seen, Jamie Kennedy is a fan of the podcast, or
nice.
Maybe he's not. I have no idea. But the point is, he was kind enough to cut a spot for us. And I think he is a fan as of today, at least. Cool. But all the books on the walls at the show, they're the same books. Everybody's got the same books.
Exactly.
Like, oh, there's another whatever. Insert key, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Copper Age book there. And we have, collectors who on the regular CGC boards pretend like they're, what's the word I'm looking for? Somehow astute because they badmouth modern comics as if their fucking Silver Age books are somehow rare. Get out of town, or their Bronze Age books are somehow rare, and they're not. And these foreign language comics, they truly are.
They're truly rare.
Yeah, if
we call them ghosts.
Let me add one gentleman to the discussion who I'm hoping is a little less familiar with this stuff than me, and will have some questions that I think will be closer to the things that other people are thinking about.
Okay, go
Gary.
Hey, how you doing, Nico?
Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see
Gary.
you as well. Hi, how are you doing?
Matt, Gary, do you guys know one another?
No, I don't think
No,
so.
no. I'm a social
Nice.
pariah. I just keep my own little corner of the comic webs over here. But I heard
Nice.
some for age. I
Yeah.
heard some foreign. I heard a little bit, just a little bit in pieces. So why don't you fill me in?
Well, Matt will take your social shut in and raise you 10. He is the editor in chief of the one and only foreign comic collector magazine, and I have been trying to pick his brain about these books. I know this is something that you and I have talked about, and what I was just discussing was, what piqued my interest initially was that these books are like as rare as the most rare Golden Age books around. We talk about like ghost variants. Good luck trying to find
Wow.
whatever the hell that is.
Yeah.
This is a Taiwanese 2001 Marvel. Now, the Taiwanese Marvels are freaking ghosts. They are phantoms. They are extremely hard to find.
Wonder why.
In fact, well, Taiwan is like the size you could probably fit Taiwan in what, Jersey? So like,
Yeah, maybe.
when you're talking rarity and foreigns, you have to talk about it in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I want to find a
there's
Taiwanese Marvel with someone throwing a Molotov cocktail.
Yeah.
Too soon.
No, well, I hope not.
Too soon. Look at Gary. Too
I'm
soon.
Some of the Hong Kong stuff, some of the Hong Kong bootlegs, really hard to freaking find, man. Some of the you talked about Golden Age. There's actually Chinese Golden Age editions.
It's wild.
That are from the late 40s, 50s, and I think they did like Dick Tracy. They did some Disney. They did. They actually did some DC. They did some Batman. Some of the rarest stuff comes from Asia, and I've got a lot of different reasons for that. But one of the biggest ones of like a lot of the Asian countries is space. Think about space for a second. As an American, we have space. You could be poor and have fucking space, right? But in places like Taiwan,
just move to Ohio,
Japan,
right?
Korea, space is a premium because they're so packed into their cities. And so because of that, it's not like you can be a collector and have massive amounts of collections. So in many ways, culturally, a Chinese collector told me this and one time too, whereas in some Asian countries, they don't even consider something collectible unless it's like 200-300 years old. Anything within like 50 years or like, who gives a shit? So there's cultural reasons. There's also reasons in print run. I don't remember.
So those would be Bamboo Age comics, right? Bamboo Age, would that be the?
You could call them Bamboo Age. But yeah, I mean, and then print runs. Think about it. Okay, I'll give you another example. The Western European stuff's pretty easy to find. You can find it. But take the Netherlands, for example. One time I was writing an article on a Netherlands book, and I looked up just the population of not even Netherlands, but just Dutch speakers. And I think it was about as much as is in like Tennessee or something.
Wow.
So do you think the print runs were heavy on those books? Fuck no. The print runs in the Bronze Age were huge, especially on titles like Spider-Man. The print runs from the gate, from when these books were produced, were probably like 5% of what an American print run was, 10% of what an American print run is. And that's even before you get into the lack of a bag and board culture, environment, third world country conditions.
Humidity,
think about this
right?
too.
Yeah,
Humidity's crazy. Like Brazilian e-balls. Those fucking books had to survive, along in certain, maybe not on the coast, but in interior parts of the country, fucking rainforests, man. Like,
wow.
There's a reason some of these foreigns are so freaking rare, and it's not even. And then there's cultural reasons, there's environment reasons, there's production, print run reasons. There's all kinds of fucking reasons. So go ahead. Sorry.
So in more populous like Asian countries, were their print runs like what were their print runs around? Because they do have their population was huge, but what were
their
print
population
runs
was huge? It depends. We've tried to find, like, for instance, on the Taiwanese Marvels, I think those are probably some of the rarest Marvel Bronze Age in existence. Would probably be the Taiwanese Marvels.
Wow.
I think I know of 2. In America, there's only 2 of this. And but then you had countries like Japan. Japan did some stuff in the 50s. They did some DC stuff, I believe, some Superman and some others. I don't, that's the other problem with Asia is that they already had their own culture with comic books. They have had manga forever, and they consider
Can
it
we talk a little bit
superior
about that?
to us. Uh-huh.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about that? Because that's something that like American comic book audiences, I don't know if we're ignorant of it or in denial about it or just don't talk about it.
And in denial
or
about
a combination of the above. But like I mean, it's like well settled that the Yakuza uses comic books to funnel and fucking like launder money. Right?
Oh,
I mean, that's how they
huge.
do it. Like
because in Asia, adults read fucking manga. It's not so you didn't have this.
And I gave up looking for them. Like I remember,
no stigma was attached to it.
There's no stigma.
Well,
manga was something
they've been doing it.
Done,
the conventions for long before we ever did. Right? Bigger, better, badder, huge.
That I don't know. That I couldn't tell you.
That's for sure.
I know that. Think about
they're hard.
Like
have you ever tried to find any of those books?
The Asian books?
Nightmare. Yeah.
The Asian books? Oh yeah, it's hard. But
I mean, I was just like, I gave up quick.
Let me guess, you were looking for the Japanese Spider-Man Playboys?
No.
Oh, you're looking for something else. Okay.
I found a guy for that thanks to you and Robert. For at least for a little bit, and then
Andy,
Robert hooked me up.
Andy's our boy.
Shout out to Andy.
Yeah. Andy Takar's our boy. Oh, and I wanted to bring up the Rickard brothers too. There's so many people I forget their names. I want to give them a shout out. The Rickard brothers. Ron Rickard. He's the king of foreign Star Wars. Guy knows it all. He would say he doesn't, but he does. Brian Rickard's his brother. So he came into the foreign world a little bit later, but he's thinking about putting a second FF 1 through 20 run together, Mexican run. It's like crazy shit. That's just hard to do. But anyway, yeah. So Asia had their own manga. They had manga already. So as Western panel art kind of went over there, my understanding is, and of course, a guy like Andy or the Japanese expert's a guy by the name of Henro. His name is Steven. And Henro means pilgrim in Japanese. And he went to Japan and fell in love with the culture and all of that. And being a comic book collector, he then started going and just enmeshing himself in everything Western that made it to Japan. And the dude's a freaking expert. That's the other interesting thing I wanted to tell you too, Nico. There's no it's hard to say there's an overarching expert. I'm not an expert, but what I can do is I know the guys that are and get the info from them. So that's why I say, I'm an
well, compared to Gary and I, you're a fucking expert.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Nico knows Golden Age. I know a little bit of foreign. I collect some modern, Panini, easy to find stuff, and old Tintins from Belgium.
What I was really excited to hear from Gary about, because this is not Matt's strong suit. I was talking to him about this emerging market. Why I thought it would be interesting to people that enjoy comic book wars, and I'm like, I was hip to foreign language comics to the extent that I knew that there were Perillo covers, Delato covers,
Delato,
Supergirl. The Delato Joker Batman book is just beautiful.
You know what? I remember when that book was $35. There were guys buying that book for $35. My buddy Nuno in Portugal, he was like, I think this Delato book's going to be huge. I'm trying to find him wherever I can. He was paying $35 for it. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I'd like to hear what he thinks is going to be huge today.
I don't know. Nuno's a cool guy too. He's a guy from Portugal. Yeah, I'm weak in that. I don't really do a lot of modern foreign stuff.
But Gary, you've been picking up the I'm gonna screw this up. It's like the PlayStation Spider-Man.
Oh yeah. Those are the things that I'm not. I have too much going on where I can't really delve into as deep as you're getting into like some of the people who are really into the niche areas of like foreign like I would love to. I'm fascinated hearing someone else talk about it. I know that I'm dealing with like stacks of like this modern stuff here, right? That I'm like I'm moving that to get like more into collection stuff, that the kind of things that Nico talks about all the time. Like I'm a big proponent of taking those variants, right, and not the flash in the pan ones, but the ones, older Adam Hughes stuff, older things that then you can just cycle
stuff that's going to hold more value.
Yeah. So then I was looking at these, like PlayStation Spider-Man, and I'm like, oh, Marvel really wants to develop them. They want to have a different like sort of market. They're gonna have the Avengers PlayStation book come out now. So I'm like, well, let me get those. Panini book was the first cover, and that cover was by Marco Cicchetto, right? So he had done this cover that they did a reprint of that came later. And then I started to say, well, wait a minute, I have a root now. This little Italian shop, right? A comic shop that I found online somewhere. They said, well, we don't sell books online, but I'm like, oh, I really want this book. What else do you have? They sent me a list, and I started to use Google Translator, and they were Google translating back, and we're communicating in Italian. So now I have this inroads where I know that, oh, you know what? Maybe there's something I'm looking for that's early. Like Federici, right? Like Federici has been doing these covers that have now been getting big here. I know he had done this series called this hardcover Saria book, which is a very like an adult, like sort of erotic, but like fantasy book. And I'm like, this was his first like published stuff. And I'm more into finding those artists like Nico was talking about. But what I'm interested in, because I didn't hear the discussion in the beginning, I know everybody's been into sort of the, you see the Mexican Spider-Man that came back because of the Gwen Stacy, the timeline where she survived. So it's funny that I just saw last week, I started to see it trending up again. Like people are like, oh, I have you heard about this Spider-Man? I think it's like the third or fourth time where people are discovering books, and it's sort of like this, you see this bell curve, right? Where you see it up and down. And it's interesting that, do you guys notice that there are particular times where people come out of the woodwork looking for these kind of books? And
well, okay, so I'll give you an example. The Guardian wrote a fucking article on the Mexican non-canons. The Guardian's huge. Oh, yeah. The guy from IDW, one of the editors, he probably the biggest spike I've ever seen was when he shared an article on the non-canons on his Twitter. And it was insane, man. Dude, I remember when non-canons used to be bought for between $15 and $30 a pop.
Yeah,
the most you'd pay would be maybe like $80. Because this is the crazy part. The Mexican collectors oftentimes didn't like them either, because the stories were kind of lackluster. I remember back in the early days trying to find them, and a lot of Mexican collectors go, oh, well, yeah, I kind of got rid of those. I didn't really like those so much. I like the American stuff. But the hardcore guys still seek out that stuff. And, that brings me to another thing. When I wrote the first article, I mentioned something called the foreign indigenous bias. And what the foreign indigenous bias is, that's when a country's collectors, or a group of them, or a lot of them, or however many, decide that the American output is superior to their local indigenous output of that character. Now, of course, all the countries had foreign created stuff. That's really neat. But when it comes to the American pop culture stuff, some of these collectors would have these real big biases towards their own local stuff, especially when the American stuff was plentiful and you could get it. So I'll give you an example. In the Philippines, you had American military bases. The American military bases had American comics. Where do you think the Filipino collectors wanted to get their comics from? From the American military bases, because the local bookstore output was considered lesser than, and the culture there in the Philippines even kind of crafted this idea, because in the bookstores there, so say and I've had Filipino collectors talk to me about this. They were a young kid. They went to National Bookstore. They walked in there and they told their parents, "I want some comics." Their parents said, "Well, go get your comics." They'd go, and you could actually buy American comic books in some of the bookstores. Well, some of the bookstores would put the American books behind glass, and the National Bookstore books would be just on like a normal comic rack. So the the Filipino kid would go and he says, I want that one, mommy. Oh, well, that one's such and such. For the price I'm going to pay for that book, you could get 10 of these bookstore editions. Is it any wonder that they have this bias towards their own shit? Because culturally they're already kind of looking at their local stuff as being shit. I once was trying to find a Portuguese Spawn 1, and my contact Nuno in Portugal said, "Oh, that's going to be a tough one." Why, dude? I mean, this was printed in like 90 something. I mean, this shouldn't be hard. No. You don't understand. The American Spawn 1 was on the newsstands around the same time. The Portuguese collectors, most of them speak English. And this is something that you'll see that a lot of foreigners speak English. It says, so they weren't buying the fucking Abril Portuguese Spawn 1. They were buying the American Image 1. And he had to struggle to find me that Portuguese Spawn 1 where, you know, as you guys know now, an American Spawn 1's like nothing. It's like toilet paper.
Wow.
Unless it's newsstand. And then it's
it's newsstand.
Yeah,
which I just finally picked up one of those myself.
Nice. I bought one today for $3.
Yeah.
I was
Nice.
so happy. Yeah, I was so happy.
So you deal with, you know, Asia. Asia's a tough cookie to crack. Poland, for some reason. I just talked with a friend of mine. His name's JF. He was in a Polish group and they were laughing at him because they were like, why do you want... See, and so this is the other interesting thing. Sometimes the collectors of certain countries are really helpful. Sometimes they're not. Just like the foreign indigenous bias works one way, it also works the other way.
Are the Italian people the ones that don't care about condition, or is that French, or which one is that?
It's a lot of them, dude. In Europe, like the Dutch
all of Europe.
Scale, well, not all of Europe. The Germans probably have the most advanced, the most advanced. You know, like we have our grading scale, right? Goes up to a 10. Right? There's multiple levels within our grading scale. The Dutch's grading scale has like four parts. It's like trash, well read, or not, you know, trash, all put together, but trash, nice, and newsstand fresh. In the Dutch system, newsstand fresh would be anything from like an American 7.5 all the way up to a 10. There's no delineation. So when you have grading systems that are that, you know, raw, like I can't think of the word, but you get what I'm saying. The Italians, I think, had like 5 levels.
Yeah.
The most complex grading in Europe was by the Germans. So as you get to more complex grading standards, you get to better books. But you also have to factor in, you know, the bag and board culture. For a lot of these foreign collectors, the book just being all in one piece and not having writing is like newsstand fresh to them, right? So condition doesn't matter. I have the highest graded Italian 300. It's a 9.4. You know how that was shipped to me from Italy? In a manila envelope and nothing fucking else.
Yeah,
it made it across the Atlantic in a manila envelope. So you know, conditions, and that's the other thing. If you guys want to really get into this niche, if your viewers want to get into this niche, they're gonna have to leave their conditioned anal American attitudes at the door, because being anal about condition, you just ain't gonna have a collection. You're not gonna have any books. Because you're just not going to.
The books came from Italy. That when they came from that shop that I was dealing with, it was just like really thin cardboard. But they were at least in one big mailer bag together. But I'm like, oh, no backing boards, nothing. I knew it was coming like that.
Oh yeah. Well, and this is the other thing that worried us initially. So in the early days, we had sources and contacts, and we still do all over the world. But we started to get worried because we were like, well, what if we kind of blow this coolness up, and then these American collectors go and they bring their attitudes, you know, like for instance, a book coming from Italy. Do you know what that's going to do to an Italian collector that takes a chance selling to an American collector? The book comes and the American collector says, it wasn't even in a bag and board and it's got a little tiny clip. I'm sending it back and I want my money back. That shit ain't going to do nothing but piss people off, man. I mean, there were times when I had contacts in whatever country, and I was just happy to have them. I don't give a shit how you mail the stuff. They you know, it would get mailed and maybe it would get damaged in the mail. I didn't say a word. because I don't want a chance ruining a connection with a source or a contact. And because I'm being anal about condition, I'm going to send the book back and want a refund. Fuck that. What if I need to get, the Hungarian 300 and the Hungarian collector was nice enough to do this for me? That's the other. So that's the thing. You are building a contact in Italy. You have a relationship now. You could, or do you want to be a dick and send them back and get your money back? No, because you still need access to the market. And as easy as like European books are like low-hanging fruit. Okay. The European eBay sites and other sites, you can find that stuff. Like the Dutch have Katawiki, Spain has Todo Colección. There's stuff like that. So so you can find it, but oftentimes they will not ship to the States. So it's good. I have an Italian collector that I have a relationship with. We're not having the back and forth like we used to, but he would mail me to my P.O. box American books. I would then repackage them, ship them to him. I would mail Italian books to him. And then when I got up enough stack, he would ship them to me. And that was how we handled that.
That seems like the smartest way when you're thinking about it. Like we're going to be taking a family trip in April to Venice, and it's a guy that I know that's over there, and he's been more interested in comics lately. So when I go over there, we're going to talk a little, and we're going to set something up where I can send him books back. And I think that's find an expat and find someone who has connections over there. That's easy. Cut out the middleman and just have
Andy.
it Say again.
Andy.
Yeah.
Your buddy, his buddy Andy.
Yeah. Andy's an amazing guy, and this is the other part that I want to talk about.
But I mean, Andy's not Japanese. I don't know what his nationality. I don't know what his ethnicity is. But I mean, he's not from the nation state, right?
He wasn't. I'm not.
He wasn't born in Japan.
I sometimes consider Andy like a special agent because he doesn't give me a whole lot of information about his personal life. I'm like an open book. I tell everyone everything. So I always ask my contacts info on them. But Andy, I don't know a whole lot about on that regard. I do know that Andy is well regarded in the Star Wars collecting community. If you need Japanese Star Wars material, there's only I'm sure there's a lot of other guys, but Andy's got that on lock. Like he knows all about it. He knows how to find it.
If we had to kind of rank this stuff, right? About what's the most popular in the United States as of
country-wise or
no, I mean I wouldn't. So foreign language collectors, they build these fucking sets and do
you want me to go in on set building a little bit?
Well, in a second here, but
okay.
As an outsider, the way I just kind of see this is it's like the non-canon books, which I'll say, all of them, right? Not just the Spider-Man Gwen books, but all of them are tip top from, an American traditional comic collector looking in from the outside on foreign language comics. That's number one with a bullet. Two.
Number one right now. There's see, this is the other interesting thing. If you want to talk about
you don't have the perspective. I'm telling you right now, Gary, you know what I mean? You're too deep. But number one is that, right?
Well, and that one is
that's what Comic Tom's talking about. That's what you're gonna see on CBR or Newsarama or whatever. And then I think it's just kind of the second one would be the stuff that you're not into. That's gorgeous for the record.
Beautiful.
Do you guys know this one?
Wow.
What's up, buddy?
Do you guys know this one? I do.
No.
This is my one modern foreign that I have. This was in Mexican Cosmo. So this is
shit.
You know how the Harley had all the different versions? Mm-hmm. Well, this version was sold in a Mexican Cosmo magazine. And it came with the mag. And so what I have here is still in the bag. So I took a razor blade and I sliced it from the Mexican Cosmo, but it's still in the bag. And so yeah, this is a more modern foreign variant.
Yeah, so
Edition,
two,
I mean.
right? So two would be what I would describe as these like modern mega covers, right?
Yeah.
That whatever the hell it is, you got to send me what it is so I can try to fucking find one. It's awesome. The Delato, Batman,
Yeah.
Joker, the Supergirl by Turner, you know, like those kind of like super trendy ones. And then, you know, I think we know so little about the rest of it, right? Like there's the hints of like, oh, Spider-Man appeared in Playgirl in Japan. Like that's cool. People
Playboy,
are kind of
yeah.
interested in that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, those are neat.
People build sets, but when it comes to sets, like really, Spawn, ASM 300, you know, Star Wars,
Spidey
like
129.
Spidey 129, you know them, the like the mega books, right?
Yeah.
And the set building there, like, and the foreign editions of the mega books.
Those are always hot, and everyone's looking for those because you've got. I mean, take Spider-Man 129. You got the collectors that are doing the, you know, I'll buy an 8.0, I'll sell it, and by then get an 8.5 or a 9. Then I'll hang on to that for. I know it's that whole flipping game for a number at the top of a slab. And the beauty of set building is, I like to call it geek gravity. So you know, like when you hold like a Batman one in your hand, and it's just. I mean, there could be a bunch of other comic collectors around you, and everyone just kind of goes, you know, they just go in on it, right? Geek gravity. Well, there's something about big sets, and you can see pictures of them all day long, but until you actually are in the presence of one, there's something about big sets that has this geek gravity that just draws people in. I've even seen people that aren't even comic book collectors going, oh shit, that's super cool, right? Because when you think about it, you've got Amazing Spider-Man 129. Then, as a collector, you went and you sourced, you know, the 129 set's huge. I think it's like 45, maybe even 50 books. I don't remember. Tony Pamela will know what it is. He's got the only complete one, I think. But, I mean, it's huge. So then you had to go and find dozens and dozens of books from all over the globe. And you, as a collector, forced those books, which were never supposed to be in the same space. They were never supposed to inhabit the same space when most of them were made, you know, in a pre-internet globalized world. That's the other interesting thing about sets. I think they symbolize globalism in the sense that the world became smaller. You know, a Filipino edition might as well be on fucking Mars back in 1966. You're not going to get it. Even books from Mexico, you know, pre-internet, it was going to be really hard to get those books. So as a set builder, you're taking all these books that had to go on all these individual journeys, right? Because one of the things I like about comic books is I like looking at them and wondering about the journey these books had to go. Who were the collectors that read them? Who was the collectors that loved them? You know, like comic books with date stamps and signatures on them. When you look at foreign sets, you got to go, what did these fucking books have to do to get to this one spot on the globe? So just like a black hole has this gravity, when you bust out a Punny 129, Spidey 129 set, and you go, here's the Greek, here's the second Greek, here's the Mexican Mac, here's the Spanish, here's the, you know, people just, it blows minds.
And they story, right?
And beyond, okay, so that's like the next kind of like group of books I think about, and then the last one that I think of are the comics that predate the American editions, right?
Yes,
so
there's a few.
Original manga Akira. That's what I fucking wanted. I never found it, but I'd like to get my hands on
I
some.
think the Smurfs did, you know, Hellboy did in Demon Press or whatever. And there's a few others. Actually, the first Boba Fett cover, I could be wrong. Ron would have to school me on this, but I think that UK in the Star Wars, in one of the Star Wars titles, the UK actually had Boba Fett on the cover before America did.
Yeah, Psylocke, Betsy Braddock.
Yeah.
You know, we know.
So those are cool, but you're also forgetting another.
Yeah, help me out.
And
those that's what I'm interested in.
Those are the books that have stories behind them. I'm going to show you one. Okay. So I forget the issue number. It's basically a Copper Age Spidey Shocker book. Okay, so on the Greek, in the Greek back issue market, this is known as the Spider-Man dildo issue, the sex toy issue. So the Shocker, right here, okay, if you translate his name into Greek, the direct translation, not the cultural translation, the direct translation translates into basically a vibrator, a sex toy.
My man.
Okay. Now the story of this book is, we know the translator at the time at this publisher. The publisher's called Mammoth, but he was translating the story and he decided to leave in. His name was Vasilis. He decided to leave in the direct translation instead of the cultural translation. So he tells this story of the editor calling him into his office. And I'm not doing this verbatim, okay? So Vasilis, if you're watching this, correct me if I'm wrong. But the editor basically says, Vasilis, get your ass in here. He goes in there and the editor's sitting there smoking a cigarette or whatever. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing? And Vasilis goes, I thought it was funny. And the editor says something like, takes a drag on his cigarette, and it's like, fuck it, go to press. something like that. And so when this issue hit the stands, the kids were like, oh shit, the Spider-Man villain is a sex toy.
It's amazing.
So unless you knew the story, you wouldn't know that this book is important for that reason. And so this book is sought out on the Greek back issue market because they just think it's cool. And what the translator told me that was interesting is of course we asked him the questions. So how did Marvel let that happen? Well, guess what? Marvel and DC didn't give a shit unless the check's cashed. It's not like today where the properties have, the property owners are like super anal about everything. Back pre-internet, and that's the other fun part of this niche, if you can allow me to say niche, is that there's skeletons buried in Marvel and DC's licensing departments. And the foreign collectors are finding them. The non-canons are just one of them. The Mexicans that were working at La Prensa swear that they flew to New York and they talked with Marvel, and Marvel said, yes, you can print your own versions, because they were catching up. They were printing them bi-monthly, I think. So they were going to catch up. I know that there's the story out there that says, oh, well, the Mexican publishers were upset that they were killing Gwen Stacy, right? I know that story exists, but I'm not so sure. I think the truth might be somewhere in the middle. I think they might have just got caught up, and the fact that Gwen Stacy was dying was just a happy coincidence that they were starting their non-canon run. But according to the illustrator, the maestro, Jose Luis Duran, and some of the others, they say we had all the permission we needed. We went to Marvel. They told us to do our non-canons in Ditko and Ramita type styles, right? That's why have you noticed the non-canons are heavy on borrowing from cover swiping, all sorts of stuff, from Vampirella to everything else.
Steranko, you name it.
They were trying to kind of like mimic the style, but then I've read, and recently the editor, Roy Thomas, he came to Albuquerque. I have read blogs and stuff where people had asked Roy Thomas and some other people at Marvel about the non-canons, and he had made mention, at least what I'd read, that as far as he was concerned, no one in editorial at Marvel gave them permission to do anything of the sort. So, you know what I think happened? I think they did fly to New York. I think the licensing department just ran with it and said, fuck it. Do what you want, man. Oh, here's your check. Cool. They didn't get with editorial and ask permission. They just did. This is
before WTO, before NAFTA, before the right, like.
Yeah, and now there's an army of lawyers checking everything. They didn't care. Foreign publishers mixed DC and Marvel. Foreign publishers took DC villains and put them with Marvel heroes. They did whatever the hell they wanted. They let Dildo be on the cover of a Spider-Man book in Greece. They didn't give a shit. So that shit's interesting, man. And as more collectors find these types of books like this, and then they're a Spider-Man collector, and I don't give a shit. Like I've told about the non-canon stuff. There's a reason they're so hot. How many Spidey collectors in America now have owned AF-15s and owned 1 through 100 or 1 through 300 or whatever, and they sit around with all the other Spidey collectors and they have a big circle jerk and say, "Oh yeah, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, I've done that." You know how important it is to be able to go in there and say, "Hey, I bet you I know a cool Spidey book you've never owned." And then when they find out they can't fucking find it and they're rare as shit, that's when you start to see the value, right? That's when the value starts to
shoot up. Well, after that vibrator story, I'm going to look for the Japanese Dr. Tentacle Spider-Man issue.
Well, so Spider-Man in manga in Japan, he did all sorts of stuff. He jacked off. He had sex with chicks. He did,
Yeah, I have no doubt.
and then and so that's the other. Again, we're getting back to why foreigners are so cool. They're freaking cool because, just like you said, Nico, I just went to a show today and I saw a whole bunch of books I've seen all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into shit that we haven't seen. And then there's another part of this, right? Source management, like those Italians. You're gonna go visit them when you go to Venice, right? That's freaking cool. A collector in Venice. So as like I tell people all the time, I got friends all over the world. If I was just wealthy enough to travel there, I'd go anywhere. I'd go Greece, Dutch, Brazil, Mexico. I have friends in Mexico City. I could hang out with these people. So foreign comic collecting made me a global citizen. If a typhoon goes through the Philippines, I worry about my friends there. There was some massive flooding in Serbia. I worry about my buddy Rajko there.
Yeah, Matt, I want to talk about this. I know you were trying to get on and off in an hour, and I know you've got a wife who kindly gave you an hour with us. But there's one thing I want. There's one thing I want to talk about, right? So you talked about books that have a story.
Yeah.
Let's talk about books that are important for history, because that's what I think is fascinating. Yeah. Explain that. That's fascinating to me. And quite profound. I think it's I love comics that have historical significance.
Yes, and that's I like, as I get more into the spiritual side of this stuff, I like to tell people all the time too. Foreign editions are our pop culture just reflected back to us from a foreign perspective or a non-American perspective. And also know that when I say foreign, I don't mean. Some people have said, well, foreign is negative. I don't think so. Foreign just means you're not used to it. Just means it's foreign to you. It means you don't know it, right?
Well, they're foreign language.
Or foreign language. But and we could go on an hour about classification on that too. But anyway, yes, there were books that I believe are cultural and historical artifacts. Now, what do I mean when I say that? I'll give an example. The South African Republican Press books. Apartheid was this two systems but equals, this bullshit. It was, kind of the, in my opinion, the height of racial disparities and just all the negative shit that's caught up in race, right? It's just in apartheid in South Africa. And in South Africa, during, I'd say there's South African books from the 60s, but I would say more in the Bronze and Copper Ages. Republican Press was putting out Marvel and DC books. Now, in South Africa, you had censors that would censor media. And my understanding of it is like they had like a magazine for white people and a magazine for African people, dark colored people. You had, just kind of like how segregation was in the South, where you had, the Walmart the white people shop at and the Walmart the black people shop, or whatever. It was sort of like that kind of. But what was told to me was that censoring happened at the highest levels of media. When you get down to like alternative, like what we would consider alternative weeklies, like just like, like little newspaper, like, local newspaper rags and comic books and stuff like that, that was way down on the totem pole. So the censors didn't necessarily go in there and say, oh, well, you can't show you can't show a black character or a white character or any of that kind of stuff. They just left it up to them to kind of censor themselves. So it was up to those editors and publishers to kind of decide what side of the fence they were going to be on. Were they going to show a mixing of the races, or were they not going to show a mixing of the races? And some of them did, and some of them didn't. But Republican Press had this really neat thing where a lot of the super comics Republican Press did, which they did Marvel and DC stuff, would come with posters. And they would come with posters at the time of like pop star, music stars and actors and shit like that. And inside those posters, they would have competitions printed on them where little kids could send in Polaroids or pictures of themselves and their address, and they could win things like record players and Sony Walkmans and those viewfinder things and shit like that for kids. And what's so neat about those Republican Press books is that when you own one, you own a piece of apartheid history. And if you are lucky enough to own one with a poster, you can sometimes go in there and you can open it up and you can see pictures of little African kids, dark colored kids, and little white kids together on the same page. So Republican Press was on the right side of history there. They chose to show a mixing of the races. They chose during a time in their country where there was, extreme racism and segregation and all that stuff. That is a case of a comic book transcending itself as being simply a comic book. That comic book, those South African comic books, are cultural and historical artifacts as far as I'm concerned. Now, in the same token, you could have books that were on the wrong side of history. Some of the Chilean marvels are definitely on the wrong side of history because the Pinochet government was a dictator. He went in and they started bringing in. Were doing some horrible things in Chile. What the CIA did in South America, like for instance, right now, I mean, it's a hot button topic, but immigration's a big thing, particularly immigration from countries from Central America and South America. Well, one of the reasons a lot of those countries are so fucked up is because our CIA did some crazy ass shit down there in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And they supported dictators like Pinochet. And Pinochet was doing some horrible shit. And he actually went, and I forget the publisher. I wrote a big long article on it. I have to go back to my notes. But there was a publisher down there that was leftist leaning. Pinochet went in there and cleared the publisher all out. They stopped producing leftist material and they started producing basically stuff that was beneficial to the government. And they started bringing in Marvel comic books because the Pinochet government thought at the time that so they were bringing in as much capitalist stuff as they could. So in a weird way, Iron Man was capitalist propaganda. And so that's an instance where I kind of feel like the comic book is as well still a historical and cultural artifact, but it's on the wrong side of history. Do I hate the comic book? No, I love it the same for what it is. But it's these stories that go behind these books. I'll give you another example. In Greece, the Cabanas Hellas Greeks, the Bronze Age Cabanas Hellas marvels, they're beautiful. They're thrown together. Nature is just so fucking beautiful. I have one here. This is, I'm sure you recognize that, right? That is the Iron Man 55 Greek, first Thanos, but it does not have the guts. Okay, it just uses the cover. So Cabanas Hellas did a lot of stuff where guts didn't match cover. But for me, for my Iron Man 55 set, I have to have it, and it's a hard book to find because Iron Man wasn't as popular as Spider-Man, and the print runs were lower. But in Greece, we supported the military junta in Greece. We supported the military junta in the early 70s. Like all military juntas, they like to kill people that don't think like they do. So when Cabanas Hellas was bringing out Captain America on the newsstands, there were little kids whose grandpas disappeared and never came back. Do you think Captain America was real popular over there at that time? Probably not. A lot of the Cabanas Hellas Marvels got sent back to the publisher and pulped.
Wow.
And that's why they are so fucking awesome to have. They're tough to get.
Wow.
So the comic book, another example, the Serbian EKSs. Serbian books are amazing, right? I love them.
So if you're a student of international politics, right? I mean,
I guess you could
You got an education while you're. Oh yeah, of course.
yeah,
So
no, but I mean, it just makes these fascinating scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah. So EKSs, right? These are Yugoslavian. How neat is it to say I have a former Yugoslavian, because the country of Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore. It was shattered into a million pieces from the war in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
I got my sorry, I've been sick, man. So I got my buddy. So again, global citizenship, right? As I was trying to find these books, or now you can get them on eBay, because a lot of the sellers over there realized Americans pay stupid money for these books. But back then I was looking for any source I could. I became friends with a guy named Rochko, right? And I knew what my media told me about the Yugoslavian war. Yeah, I'm sort of I lean left, I'll be honest. But at the same time, I do sort of think that our NATO's little thing down in there was to draw attention away from Lewinsky's blue dress or whatever. But anyway, I knew what my media told me. When I started talking with Rochko, I became friends, and I asked him shit like, "Tell me about the war. What was that like? What was your average? What did the average person over there think of American citizens? What do you think about me trying to find your books now? Blah 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 blah." And what he said was, he didn't like Slobodan Milosevic. I forgot to say the guy's name.
Slobodan Milosevic.
Milosevic.
Yeah.
We hated the fucking guy, but what are you gonna do when NATO bombs are dropping on you, man? You close ranks. That's what happens. So I got a lot of really good kind of other side stories from him, and it makes you think about EKSs too, right? How many kids that were reading EKS at the time in Serbia, did their dad or uncle die from a NATO bomb while they were reading this book? Or think about the siege in Bosnia, the siege in Sarajevo. The siege of Sarajevo was, I think, the longest siege of a major city, European city, since like World War II. How long were they under siege for? Like a year?
Easily.
Or a couple months? Yeah. I forget how long it was. Yeah. They had no running water. They had no food. In order to go to the market, you had to brave sniper alleys where women were getting sniped. I mean, it was crazy. How many EKSs got burned for fuel in Sarajevo?
Right, or got bombed out, bombed out,
or burned, or whatever.
Yeah.
Probably a few. So another term we like to use in the niche, I probably shouldn't say niche, is conflict books. You heard of conflict diamonds, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a conflict diamond is a diamond that came under sketchy circumstances from Africa. Well, conflict books are books that survived complex and difficult, either cultural or societal or whatever upheavals, right? I'll give you another example. One of the rarest 129s is the Colombian Cinco 129. Mm. This book is a bitch. At one point in time, we only knew of like 10 that we could prove that we could prove. Even collectors even Spanish-speaking collectors in Mexico and some of those countries can't find this book, or they're hard to find. This book, I think, was printed in it was either the late 70s or early 80s. I forget, but that was around the same time that Pablo Escobar. Oh, wow. You've been watching Netflix, Narcos.
Yeah.
Pablo Escobar was blowing that country to smithereens. How many kids were in lookouts for Pablo Escobar, and while they were waiting, looking out for the cops, were reading El asombroso hombre rana, el castigador, the Punisher.
He was probably handing them out to the kids.
Maybe he was like, let's get the kids some Colombian Cincos, man.
Yeah,
that'll help us keep. There'll be lookouts for the government. So
can we talk about this term niche for a second? So
yeah,
I may have started that, right?
I started it. I started using niche for a long time, and then a buddy of mine named JF, one of the best sourcers in the game, was like, dude, you need to stop saying niche, because it's not. And especially now, it's starting to not become niche-y. It used to be. I mean, it used to be like.
Well,
99.9,
when I said I started it, I meant on the podcast in describing what it was like for you when you got started, that it was in fact a niche. I think, to some extent that term probably has in the same sense that like foreign may have to some people like a derogatory connotation, but fuck, when I tell people I'm a comic book collector and they don't like comic books, they think that's a fucking niche. So at least within the hobby, though, I don't necessarily, if it's still niche-y, not for long. I mean, it is a robust community and a global community, and there's just so much that's so fascinating to guys like Gary and myself that are, we consider ourselves, I think, shrewd students of comics. And you start talking about stuff that reminds me of the
how much
there's so much to learn,
how much we still like there is to learn within
well,
and it's like, beautiful, man. It gets me excited.
Well, and who doesn't want to learn these? And this is the other interesting thing about it too. As I started researching this stuff, foreign comic journalists, they did do some articles. Like there's some articles in some of the older publications on like Nemo Kid, Italian Superman, and this and that. But it never really went. They did do some stuff. Even Wizard did a few things. Back in the day, Comic Buyer's Guide. I think one of a lot of people, I tell people this and it kind of blows their mind. Conan's first appearance in comics wasn't in 1970 in Marvel. It was in 1953 in Mexico. But
but I like the pulp better.
Yeah, and then there was there's the pulp, the classic pulp. But there wasn't a whole lot of it out there. When we made the magazine, we said we're going to just concentrate on this and this style of collecting, and we got all kinds of words for stuff too, which is kind of fun because we're creating the lexicon as we go. How beautiful is that? That's fucking awesome. And then this is the other interesting thing, for a lot of us who don't have money coming out of our asses, within the comic book world, there really wasn't anything to do that had never been done, right? Like depending, so there's popular sets, but you could be an American collector that say you have, you really dig like, Daredevil issue 10 or something, just any random issue, right? And go, I like that cover. I've always had particularly a thing for this book. I'm going to build that set, and there's a good chance that you could be the first collector to ever build that issue number set. For the
viewers, Gary just bounced off. His computer died. He'll be back. And as far as building, being the first guy to build a set, I was asking Robert about this earlier today. Like, were you the first guy that did Playboy Spider-Man?
I think,
or Japanese Playboy Spider-Man. And
in America, at least.
He thinks not. He thinks someone else in America did it first.
Maybe, but I don't know.
How sweet is it to be able to ask a question like that?
It's awesome, right?
That's phenomenal.
Like maybe you're into pick a book, pick an issue you're in, or
are you the Spawn guy?
Yeah, but I wasn't the first. Another old school guy by the name of Trent Claus is the king of Spawn. He's the guy that runs Spawn World. And he not only built Spawn 1 from all over the world, he's building 1 through 10. And in Japan, you can have up to like 6 or 7 issues, individual prints of one issue. So imagine how hard that is.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. I've seen some of those Japanese Spawns. They're beautiful.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're beautiful. They have those little bookmarky things.
And they're cheap.
They have the OBs. That's the other
for the time being.
For the time being, these books are still pretty relatively cheap.
And that's the other thing that I kind of really like about this that you mentioned, in the comic market today, it's as if you need to be independently wealthy. If you've got money to spend, you can make money on comics. It's very much like a big player's game, and then there's sort of the rest of us scurrying for pieces. In the foreign language market, you can add value
by
being able to navigate certain websites. That's in and of itself, just a really fascinating and I think appealing thing for many collectors.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know what those things are, right? But like I know there's, for example, certain websites that are more conducive to finding non-canon books from
Facebook
France
groups,
or Mexico. That there's certain websites that are more conducive to getting the Spider-Man, the Playboy Spider-Man books. Whatever it may be. Gary was talking about having to do the language swap on what the hell is it, like Google Translate or whatever it may be, to try to communicate with retailers in Italy. And that little bit of work plus some extra knowledge, I think allows you to add value in a way that was initially appealing to comic guys when they could do that with CGC.
Yep.
Right? Like a little bit of work, slabbing, you would add value, you can make some money and pay for your books. And here you can do that too. And I think that's really important.
You can even add value by education, right?
No question about it.
You can take a Mexican non-canon and, like I had said earlier, walk into any comic store if you own one in America, walk up to the front counter, look the store in the eye and said, I bet you I have a Spider-Man comic book you've never seen. And there's a good chance they'll look you back and say, whatever, kid, I've seen it all. I've been in the game, blah, 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 blah. And then you bust out Gwen Stacy wedding non-canon issue, and you tell them, oh yeah, by the way, Gwen Stacy didn't die in Mexico. She stayed girlfriends with Peter Parker. Oh, and in this issue, he had a dream where he married her. Oh, and by the way, she's got a banging ass. What?
Bada bang.
You open it up, you go, see that booty right there? That is a Mexican corn-fed rice and bean booty that Jose Luis Duran put on Gwen. Not this stick-thin twiggy shit from the 70s. So you go in there, you drop a little knowledge, you show people shit that they haven't seen, and you've added value. And that's what this game is all about. And that's what FCC is all about. And we've been doing that. We could have very selfishly just sat on this shit, but we didn't. We decided we wanted to, get this stuff out there. And if a byproduct of that is that our collections rise in value, then cool. Or if not, it's cool. I don't care. I love owning these books. I love the friendships with the collectors that I've made. I'll give you a tip with sources. He was talking about Google Translate. I always tell new guys into this stuff, when you're dealing with foreign sellers or contacts or sources, use Google Translate to talk to them in their language first. And within that, you then say, do you speak English? If you speak English, let me know. And I've always felt it's a sign of respect. It's a way of going to the foreign source or contact and saying, hey, I care enough about this and about what we're doing that I'm going to take that extra step and I'm going to try to speak to you in your language. You'd be amazed. Just that simple act will allow them to already be interested and go, oh shit, this American guy wants some of these books from here. Why? God, I mean, we could talk about this shit forever, Nico.
Yeah, well, I wanted to do one last thing before we jump off, which is talk a little bit about your forthcoming podcast, because that's one of the things I was happy to be out front. You may have been mentioned by some other podcasts, but it's my understanding that you and my buddy John, our buddy John, and potentially Robert, maybe some others.
Yeah, Robert will definitely be a guest star on some episodes. So
what's going to happen?
We think the time is right for this. And Global Comic Safari on YouTube, we're working on getting the channel up and running. John and I are already working on the first show, and it's kind of a collab. It's a collaboration between FCC Magazine and Tales from the Flip Side. And those guys are awesome over there. They love the foreign stuff. John Z, Robert, they're Tales from the Flip Side alums. They kind of have fallen in love with this side of the stuff. And John, he's a really smart guy. He knows Like he knows the market. Like I'm not going to pretend to say I know shit about the market. I know some stuff about the foreign market. But yeah, like I'm really excited about it. It's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be called Global Comic Safari. We're going to try to keep episodes very short because we don't want to extend it too far. We're going to try to keep them within 30 and 45 minutes, maybe an hour max. And we're going to have cool features like what's your indicia, talking about foreign publishers, because the stories about the foreign publishers are fascinating too. Not only the foreign publishers, but there's characters too. Like Japan, there was a guy named Kosei Ono. I don't know how to say his name right, but in Japan they call him the Stan Lee of Japan, and he was the guy. Him and I think an editor. I think it's like Kosei. I don't know how to say it. Andy's going to kill me. But anyway, what this guy did was he was the guy that reached out. That's my understanding of it. He was the guy that reached out to Marvel to get a lot of that stuff licensed and brought over to Japan. Another guy that is interesting, of course, is Cabanas Hellas, the guy that brought the Marvel to Greece. I've been in contact. I've been trying to get. He has a daughter. I want to interview his daughter. So there's another part. Remember, I'm a journalist too, in a way. I guess I'm a horrible writer. Without Tim Bildhauser editing me, I'd be unreadable. But it'd be fascinating to talk to her. What was it like when your dad was publishing this American material and you guys were suffering because it wasn't that popular? And what did he fly to Marvel? Did he go visit Marvel? Who else? There is someone else trying to. Oh, there's a story about a guy named Hector Nava. Have you heard of Mexican HNG copies? They are actual file copies. So this guy Hector Nava ran like an art studio. I don't know if he had like a stable of artists or if it was just him. I'm not sure exactly. But Hector Nava worked for all the big Mexican publishers. So what he did was, not only do I think he got subscriptions to the comics he was working on, I think he got just subscriptions to as many comics as he could, and he stored them in like a library of some sort, and they just became reference material for the artists that worked in that studio. But all those books, a majority of those books, I'd say like 80% at least, got a stamp on it that said HNG. And this collection was massive. We think there were multiples of books. Some HNGs are in beautiful condition. Some, it's. I'm not going to say it's the Mile High of Mexico, but it's a massive collection with a lot of history behind it. And that collection got broken up. So throughout the Mexican back issue market, you'll find Studio HNG copies all over the place. They're all over South America, all over Mexico, and it's because that huge collection just got sold out from underneath. There's the Palacio collection, which is an interesting collection. That would be more closer to what we would consider like the Mile High, because the books were in such beautiful condition. There were these books that were just put in stacks and just left alone. We're pretty sure they were stacks because of the way the dust shadows are on the books. Palacio books are some of the nicest Mexican silver Bronze Age books that we've ever seen. I mean, beautiful newsstand fresh books, crazy color strike. So there's a lot of really interesting stories within about the books themselves, talking about the different publishers and the characters within those worlds. So yeah, I mean it's fascinating, man. It's cool. I had some stuff to show that, like, we're talking about Filipinos. This is a national bookstore, DC. And, it's what, the third appearance of Jonah Hex? 12? I think it's the third. Anyway, notice up here, you see the pricing circle? It's just blank. See how it's just blank? For whatever reason, the National Bookstore DCs would come up blank in the pricing circles. Sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. So I actually think that there are Filipino bookstore books hiding out in backstock here in America in shops at different places, and people just don't know it. Some Filipino books will still have the pricing information, and the only way to tell that it's different would be the back. Okay. And it would have a National Bookstore house ad, right? Without the house ad, you wouldn't be able to tell. But if the book's in a bag and board, you can't see the back anyway.
Right.
So for particularly eagle-eyed people, you might be able to find Filipino books. And, and we think a lot of Filipino books made their way here from militaries that were stationed overseas that brought them back in their collections. And so they somehow made their way back here and got dispersed out into the back issue market because they're still in English, right? But what's interesting about that is most of the Filipino editions that stayed in the Philippines are trashed because the Philippines, again, we're talking jungle, and we're talking the foreign indigenous bias. We're talking the issues. We had a guy that was in the Philippines that was putting ads in all the major newspapers in Manila and Quezon and all those places. And he put ads in the paper that said, looking for bookstore books, anything you have, buying collections, right? He put this ad in all the newspapers. And I think he only was coming up with like maybe 1 or 2 phone calls a month. And he did find some collections that he ended up buying from. The Asian Comic-Con, the big Comic-Con that they have over there in the Philippines, it's huge, right? People come from all over the islands and even places like Singapore and all that area over there. One time, this guy, he went to that con and he was hoping to find bookstore books. And he went to every dealer stall asking for bookstore books, and they told him, why would I bring those to the show? No one wants them. In an entire con filled with thousands of people and huge amounts of vendors in the fucking Philippines, he came up with this many Filipino bookstore books. 0. That's how rare those fucking books are. You can't even find them in the country of origin. One guy called that guy and said, hey, my cousin's got some of those books. Yeah, he had them in his closet or whatever. Yeah, I'm going to go visit him in a week. I'll call you when I go down there. He gets a call back from the dude and says, hey, man, I'm sorry. Those books are gone. And the guy said, well, why? Why are they gone? Oh, they used them to wrap silverware. The Filipino Marvel and DC books, we actually think are so fucking rare in some ways that many are just lost to the sands of time. Every single copy is just gone.
Matt, I want to thank you. I feel like it is always such an education, and I enjoy every moment that you give us.
Thanks, man. I can talk for hours.
Well, here's what I want to do.
I can take my shirt off.
I think that's most fascinating.
We've done that on the podcast before, but I would like to return you to your wife, and then she can undress you herself.
Let me see. Hold on, real quick. I'm going to show you one more thing, and then I'm going to let you go. This is the jewel in my foreign collection. My Italian contact got me this. This is called Marvel Speaks Your Language, okay? It has it in English, it has it in French, it has it in German, and it has it in Spanish. Now, this was a piece of marketing material that Marvel sent out to foreign publishers, right?
I love it.
Inside, you have a letter from Stan Lee. Here, give me the full screen for a second so I could show this. A letter from Stan Lee.
Nope.
It's in English, French, German, and Spanish. And it's signed by Stan Lee on here. And this whole folder is all about why you should license Marvel Comics. But check this cool gatefold out.
Spidey, Fantastic Four, Hulk, Conan.
Isn't that neat? Could you imagine if back in the day I'd gotten as many creator signatures as I wanted on this? Right now it'd be too late. But this is why this is such a neat piece, because it was marketing material. Most of these, if not all of them, I'm pretty sure got thrown in the trash. Think about it. These, if a foreign publisher went defunct, do you think they saved this? Probably not. They probably saved the file copies of comic books and stuff, but I'm not so sure these were saved. I asked my Italian contact, I was like, I was like, how have you ever seen another one of these? He's like, no, it's the only one I've ever seen. I've researched the internet. I've looked and looked and looked to find any information on this at all, and I can't find anything on it. It could truly be, you know, maybe a one of a kind, unique piece. And then this is the other thing we thought. Okay, so Marvel did this with the Latin languages, right? English, French. Well, German's not Latin; it's something else. Root. English, French, German, and Spanish. What if they did something similar for Asia? What if they did one in like English, Japanese, Chinese Mandarin, and something else? Like that would be so awesome. But this is the only one that we've ever come across. This is the jewel of my foreign collection, simply because I don't think you can just go and find this. These probably got thrown away a long time ago, and I mean, yeah, it's so anyway. I appreciate being able to come onto the show.
Matt, we appreciate you.
I'm sorry I didn't have more stuff ready to show. And,
no, this was perfect. This was perfect.
The stories were laid more than the cover did. You know, usually it's picture tells 1,000 words. It was like vice versa, because it's great to hear that, you know, the history behind those pieces. It makes me think of, you know, I just read a thing on Disney Plus, like not releasing Song of the South. Warner Brothers not releasing these Japanese and German era funny cartoons, right?
Yeah, because of racial.
These are timestamps on history, and so you own those, right? Exactly. So that was amazing to share.
Yeah, so it's neat to think of these. You know, yeah, we can think of American comic books like that because they are. They're timestamps. They're a window into that world at the time, but you know, the foreign editions are really cool because, yeah, they not only are they our pop culture reflected back at us, but those stories behind the books too make, you know, we're talking about adding value. There's a lot of value added there, man. There's a lot of interest and value, and you know, anytime you guys want me on the show, I'll come on again.
You took the words out of my mouth, so we can get you back after you and John get up and running.
Yeah, we need it. Yeah, we need a launch. What we want to do is have like 2 or 3 shows in the can before we go live. We're not going to do the shows live. We really want to, you know, like I said, we really want to edit ourselves, especially my dumb ass. I diarrhea of the mouth. It just flows. So I really need editing. I need to edit myself down. I'd like to, before I leave, I'd like to do a shout out to all my FCC peeps, all of them. If I missed your name, there's so many of them out there. Tim Bildhauser, Tony Pamela, Scott McManus, Bjorn, our buddy in Sweden. There's so many. Ken Worthing, our buddy in the UK, Nuno, Maria, all our new friends that we made on Facebook. You know, stay excited. Keep researching these books. Same with you guys. You know, that Italian content. Go have a fucking blast in Italy and go check out some comic book stores in there. See what kind of shit you can find. Italian 300s, man. You know, we want to, you know, we talk about, you know, the non-canon Spideys. You know, there's another Copper Age book that I think has the ability to kind of rise above the fray, and that's the Italian 300 because it's so beautiful with its all black cover. I mean, it's got that whole metaphor. I mean, Venom, you know, the symbiote just covered and dominated what it infects, right? Well, you know, that blackness does the same thing on the Italian 300 cover. It's a metaphor for the symbiote.
It's like the Final Tap cover of 300s.
Yeah, I mean it's awesome. So while you're down there, pick up every fucking Italian 300 you can find, and the Italian Venom Platinum. Those have been selling on eBay too. People have been wondering about those, but you know, think about the Italian Venom Platinum came with a phone book. A little phone book thing. It was polybag, and inside there was like an address phone book for some weird reason. Yeah, it's so really weird. So finding those still in a poly bag with the little booklet is hard to do as well. So if you can find those, you know, do it. And the other thing is, of course, you know, our group on Facebook it's the official Foreign Comic Collector Magazine group. Bunch of cool guys. If any of your viewers or listeners want to just go in there and say, hey, I'm interested in this, go do a post. Say, you know, they can go in there and say, hey, this is my favorite cover. I'm curious how many countries did this cover. I'd like to start trying to build that set. Another quick little tip, remember that foreign eBay is easy, right? So when you're, let's say you're on Italian eBay, okay, and it's all in Italian. If you watch something and then, so log into a foreign eBay, so log into Italian eBay or Spanish eBay or German eBay or whatever, watch it. You can kind of fumble your way to the watch button, right? Fumble your way to the watch button, watch it, then log out, go back to your American eBay account, log in, and it'll be in your watch stuff, and eBay will translate all the shit for you, most of it, not the description, but it'll translate most of the architecture of the nomenclature, and it'll change the foreign currency into dollars, and you'll be able to figure out if they ship internationally. That's a big tip for people just starting out fucking around in European eBay. So yeah. So thanks for having me, guys. Sorry if I
thank you, my friend.
Thanks for sharing your passion.
It was amazing.
Absolutely. It's great to be, you know, that's why we're here, for a passion about, you know, different, I'm not going to use the word niche, but you know.
yeah. The niche. JF's going to kill me. Anyway.
Big niche.
Okay, guys. Nico.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Thank you, my friend.
I'll be around. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook.
All right.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's.
I don't even know where to start, Gary. Like, I feel like The Godfather and The Godfather Part 3. Every time I try to get out of the foreign collector market, they pull me back in. I'm fascinated. This shows you how the trajectory for me. So it began with the books that you like now, the artists, right? Like the Perillos, the Delatos, like, ooh, that's cool. Ooh, that's cool. Like, ooh, wow, how do I get my hands on that without spending $800? To the non-canon books, went a little bit deeper with like the Playboy Spider-Man, whatever, you know, and then I've steered clear of the sets for whatever reason. It's just not my thing. Other people seem to like them. But when he started talking about the, for lack of a better description, historical artifacts, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
that's just fascinating.
Because that's, even if you're not going to chase these books down, you know, how can you still not be interested in the history, right? And things that sort of shape.
It's begging for a Netflix documentary, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And that's why I said, that's why, you know, I really made that parallel, like just looking and saying, you know, Disney should not be burying like Song of the South, right? They should be releasing that with a historical context, with an introduction to that. It's not, you know, they're not putting it out there to air it as content for kids. They're not going to put these, you know, thinking back to, you know, like Egg Foo, right? The character Egg Foo, right? In the comics, that Egg Foo, when he was first coming out, it's like a very stereotypical Asian look to it. They just had Egg Foo come out again recently looking totally different. And that's because historically, in the context of the time, people are, you know, when you have distance from something, you get a sort of, you know, an awareness that, well, wait a minute, at the time in history, this was okay, but if we forget that, then we'll repeat those same mistakes. That's why that you know, to be cliched, if you don't remember that history and the things behind this, then what was happening when this book was put out, you'll have these mistakes repeated again. But we're not going to get political on this tonight.
Yeah, no, it's ironic. The same week that I was talking about my favorite Marvel mystery comic that has Joseph Goebbels and Adolf Hitler running for their fucking lives from the Human Torch as he flies through their airplane. I've got idiots here in West Virginia doing the Hail Hitler sign in a goddamn group photo at the fucking Department of Corrections Training Academy. I literally, like, when this first happened, every single person that would find out about it, myself included, we were just sort of like speechless. And now I'm just enraged to talk about it. So again, not
and
to
embarrassed,
beat
right?
I mean,
because unfortunately, it throws like a taint over the entire like geographical area, and you're like, it doesn't do a lot for the tourist.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah, I mean, really, or
it just infuriates me. And the woman who's the head of the Department of Corrections, is the most kind and decent, smart. She was a United States attorney here in the Northern District. Like, like I and not even jokingly, often have described her as the best human person I've ever met in my entire life. And then for this to happen in a department that, she quit being U.S. attorney to go help the worst part of the government of the state of West Virginia, our prison systems. They were a debacle. And she's just done so much in such a little amount of time. And anyway, I won't beat a dead horse, but
no, that's what you get for your altruism. When you try to be altruistic, it comes back and bites you in the ass because of the stupidity and ignorance of others. But yeah, we'll segue out of that, as somebody used to say.
Amen. Let's talk comics. So Jimmy today indicated that he thinks that from a Wired magazine article that we're going to see Booster Gold. Not Adam Strange on HBO. That doesn't seem to make much sense at all to me. Can you help me clarify that? I was at a con all day, so I didn't really get too much of that news. But it looks like Booster Gold's going to be a television show on CW.
Yeah, that's what was my impression, that it's going to be a CW show, not the Strange Adventures feature. And to me, again, as soon as I hear CW, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, well, that doesn't matter. That's a shame, dude. I love Booster Gold's story. Like, I want that to be told well. I think if it was told well, lights out. Well, I like his character. Kind of. I think that whole can't help himself.
It got me thinking about that. Actually connects to, because tomorrow we're going to see the Wonder Woman trailer drop, right? Like, that's coming tomorrow, and that got me thinking again about that Max Lord who the Mandalorian is playing, right? Pedro Pascal, is that his name? And it makes me think of that Justice League book with Booster and Blue Beetle and Maxwell Lord and also Fire and Ice, who are like, people talk about Booster and Gold all the time. Fire and Ice had very big following back in the day. So that Justice League, that first Giffen Maguire Justice League, I think that's a nice book to be looking at right now. Just as you're going to have that trailer drop. Booster is featured heavily in that, right? Like that Booster and Gold, if they had ever gotten a great comedy series going, I just think the DC channel, I have DC streaming. I just realized I'm paying for it. I haven't put it on in like 3 months.
I hear Harley's good. I missed all of Teen Titans season 2.
I saw
Teen, and I heard it was great.
Yeah, I
got a friend who hates everything. If it's a movie, he's like, it's trash. If it's a TV show, it's trash. I mean, he's the toughest critic in the world. He makes Jimmy look like a beacon of positive reinforcement. But he loved it. He absolutely loved it. And I was like, oh, well, if you passed your test, this is going to be great. I can't wait.
Jimmy's a connoisseur of trash cinema, so we know that
that's
already.
True too. That's right. But like, he's also he's a tough goaley when it comes to like normal things. You know what I mean? Anything, right?
Life in general. But yeah, it's funny. I think it's because it took such a realistic sort of. It had a very grim and gritty feel to it, right? Like watching those scenes.
Season 1 was great.
Yeah, and it was kind of sad seeing all of the attention going to like, the makeup, the Starfire stuff. Like it really took away from a show that was doing something very different. And I think anyone who's given that a shot it's like the Wire of comic movies, right? Comic shows, I guess, maybe. Not that I'd ever put that show. That show's on an echelon of itself.
Oh, buddy.
I just wanted to go back one sec because when we're talking, about foreign books and collectors of foreign books, it makes me think of how the big two keep trying to break through into that foreign market. Like, I think back to when they did that new Superman, right? That was going to be the thing. And they were going to have this Justice League of China that was going to be big. That book sort of faded out. You hear me all right? Am I right, Nico? You got me?
I cannot, but if somebody can help us out, that might be me.
I didn't change anything up. It should be.
Yeah, and then for some reason I'm just getting a lot of feedback. Anybody in the chat want to help?
Yeah, let us know. I'm following through too. Maybe Robert. If, you know, so if anyone's still, people might have fallen asleep with headphones in their ears. Nico, or 9 listeners.
You got a pair of headphones you can use?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me pull something out.
Okay. If I made him do that unnecessarily, I want to apologize to the 2 people that are watching us here at the hour and 45-minute mark. We are appreciative, nevertheless.
Okay, any difference at all?
No.
Oh, now I hear you nice and loud though. Hold on. Let me shut my because you sound perfect. So I don't know if anyone's hearing us, hearing me.
Yeah, it's your mic, I think.
Huh. Weird. I could shift over to my phone, which might be better. Though sometimes this bounces on this phone. Let's see. Okay.
If I'm doing this unnecessarily and I'm torturing everyone who's listening, I want to apologize in advance. In order for there not to be dead airspace, I can show you guys some of the things I picked up today. Oh, Gary's back.
Hold on.
Saved
1
by
second.
the bell.
Wait. I'm gonna set my phone up. Okay, do you hear me right now? Better?
I can hear you. We got to get rid of the other me.
Yeah, I don't know where that's coming from. Hold on. Oh, you're off on my Mac.
Bada bing, bada bing.
It says I'm in the show.
Yeah, I don't know why you can.
Yeah, because you were fine the whole time before, right? We didn't have an issue before.
Well, with the double play.
Yeah. Let me see if I have anything else open. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. 1 sec, Nico. Okay. How am I now?
Good.
Not good?
Yeah. No, we're good to go.
Do you hear you?
I lied.
Okay. There we go.
Well, hold on.
Yes.
You hear I can hear myself.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't get it. Sorry. This is the best time for everybody to be listening. I hear you coming through okay. I don't know where I'd be getting any feedback from. I have my laptop shut and I only have my. Yeah, you know what? Sometimes I think on the camera, I don't know why it does that on the phone. I'm gonna try to get it on the laptop because I still have it open. Hold on. I'm gonna shut down on here. Give me
the headphones.
Talk about a book for a second and let's see. Yeah, that's what it sounds like, right?
My buddy Robert. At least he knows what the hell he's doing. Well, and at least I know I'm not crazy. Gary, you back? Gary's frozen now. We'll remove Gary from the stream and hopefully he'll rejoin. Is Gary back? Gary's not back. All right. Oh, Gary's back. Guess who's Bazak?
Do you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thank you. Hallelujah. I was worried I was going to have to show my next CGC submission. We wouldn't want to do that.
Oh, my God. I could see already we're dropping viewers left and right already, Nico. So what I wanted to bring up was, I guess the big two have tried to, break through with New Superman, which was going to tie into this new Justice League. It was going to be a Chinese super team coming through. We saw Marvel recently, Agents of Atlas, which had some initial buzz, but now I think it's that's died down. And it looks like they cannot figure out, they want to break the Asian market through American titles instead of trying to, and I guess bringing in that Arrow book and bringing in Swordmaster, right? They took the original Asian material and then they had backup stories by Greg Pak. Greg Pak was the one who wanted to bring these titles over. And for some reason, they just can't sustain. Like if you look at the numbers, and we predicted it. I think that they would just start plummeting down, and no one wants to buy an Arrow solo book, and no one wants to buy a Swordmaster book. And
I
they
didn't
threw
fucking buy
Shang-Chi
any
in.
Agents of Atlas. Did you?
Only the first, and it's funny.
But you buy everything because you read everything. I don't even know if you're a good like.
I'm a horrible judge of
gauge.
What, yeah.
You're a good judge because you are well informed. You're just a bad gauge of like what people generally do. Yeah, I mean, I passed, and I'm a little more like sort of looking for. I don't know, experimental than most. You know what I mean? Like I'll give things like, I'll give it a try. But I think you're 100% right. And we've talked about this, if not on the podcast before, at least privately before, that clearly there is going to be a move by Marvel corporate to look for these kind of like international characters. You were starting to talk about Shang-Chi. I think that they'll have like an international X-Men team up. You know what I mean? Like they just will. And I'm looking for those kind of characters that like, oh, this will be a Southeast Asian character. This will be a Eastern European character. You know what I mean? Like,
but that was, I mean, when you think of when the X-Men 94, right? John says X-Men, that was Storm and Colossus from Russia and Nightcrawler from Germany and bringing in Wolverine from Canada, you know?
Yep.
And having all of these characters represent, and Banshee, right?
Uncanny X-Men. Issue number 94. Not for those who aren't.
Yeah, that's what I tend to do. You know, you're gonna have to subtitle me.
You and me both. But yeah, Jimmy yells at me about that. He's like, I understood what you said, but nobody else.
Right, because we never know. You know, if someone just listened to for an hour and 20 minutes on foreign import comics, you know, what are the chances they're going to also know, you know, where the X-Men first started, right? But
oh God.
So let's cycle through a little. So you were talking. So here I started to look through some solicits because the books this week, we know Ms. Marvel, like no one wants to talk about Ms. Marvel anymore because first of all, who cares? It's another villain that is going to get some hot spec for a couple of weeks. I think issue 5 is the way to go on that one, not issue 10, but I'm not going to get into that debate already because that's already being like issue 10. And for those who don't know, really quick, Ms. Marvel, issue 10 this week. She, her suit rebelled against her, this Kree nanotech suit called the Storm Ranger that she got in issue 5. She was beating up Hyde and then the suit took over. She zapped it off her. The suit then formed this thing and said error protocol, Storm Ranger formation, whatever. And people are saying now that that's a cameo that's going to lead into the first full in issue 11, when really I think you need to go back and look at issue 5, which is essentially you see the Storm Ranger set up for the first time. She gets that outfit for the first time. That to me is first appearance, very much like Secret Wars 8, and which again, that issue actually homaged on the cover, which is really interesting, right? They had that was not like done by accident. So they have it's the same sort of setup as when he first gets his symbiote suit in Secret Wars 8. And even the second print actually has a bit of an homage. It's a split cover which has 3 panels and then a panel of her standing in the same pose as the first printing. So I think those are the issue 5. It's probably too late to move on it now. And those books are almost neck and neck in terms of how they're running. But now there's a push for issue 11 to be the next one. So that was the big book, I think, that came out this week. I know people talked about Power Rangers, TMNT. I think I've been going back and buying those TMNT Ghostbusters ones. I think you brought those up on your show as well, Nico, when you were talking about maybe Comic Book Wars, I think, right?
Was all Jimmy. Jimmy loved those books.
Yeah. Again, So I want to talk
like
about
those rare variants. I think you talked about, like, you know what I'm talking, the Ghostbuster.
To me, those like the issue. I think I have the issue 3 back there where it's like a yellow, and I love yellow covers, but the yellow, and he's looking from behind, and he has a Ghostbusters pack on, and I think it's Raphael, but it may be I don't know. I always screw up my turtles. I know Raphael's the red one, so I know any TMNT fan out there right now is like really upset at me, but. I'm not detail oriented. It's funny. I read a lot of books and I do things like that, but I can't match a name and a face for the life of me. It must be all that other information taking up space. But one thing I wanted to talk about, I was going through some solicits for the week ahead, and as I started to skip through, I don't know if anyone, do you ever look at Fresh Comics? Do you use that to sort of see the covers
Yeah.
coming? So Fresh Comics is a really cool app that they give you they have all the releases sort of set up like this, and they do it, and you can just flip through by week, and it gives you right up to, I think this goes up to February 5th. And at that point, there's only 10 Marvel items on there. But as you go through, you click on, let's say, Marvel. It gives you all the covers. You click on it again. It gives you the solicit right there. So so I was flipping through, as I tend to do. I flipped through Marvel because Marvel is where, if you're specking on books and looking to go back through the past, that's where your money's made. DC is not the place to make money on books from their history. If you notice, it's the Marvel creators who we always talk about, that trinity of Cates and Aaron and Ewing, I think, are the three right now. You throw a couple other guys in there, you see what Chip Zdarsky's doing. But I saw coming up in the new Guardians of the Galaxy, and so Donny Cates was doing that 12 issues. Al Ewing is taking over with a new issue 1 again. And the only thing of interest on the cover was Novar, right? We know Marvel Boy's coming back, that Novar Marvel Boy, who always seems to, again, be cyclical. Like, people chase that #1 cover with Marvel Boy. They chase the variant, which has Doc Midas on it. But what's interesting, the solicit says that the main sort of who they're going up against are these gods of Olympus. And these are the new gods of Olympus that popped up back in Avengers No Road Home. And in that book, in issue 10, and that book was probably, that series was most known for introducing Conan into the Marvel Universe, which many people have since hated. I know you're not a fan at all, Nico, of Conan being in the, yeah.
That's kind of silly.
But you know what? Marvel is Wolverining him out there, right? He's everywhere right now. He has 2 solo series with Valeria. He had the one with Belit. He has Savage Avengers. He was in the No Road Home. He has his own Conan book. He has Savage Sword of Conan out. And now we just...
If we're going to retcon Conan's history, I'd have put him like in the Savage Land with Khazar or some shit. You know what I mean?
Well, that's funny you mentioned that, because I've shown that book before. That is, it's actually Conan with... it's the first cover of Savage Sword that has Conan and Khazar on the same cover. And I think that's an interesting cover to have, right? Because Khazar has sort of been buried to the side, but I think we're supposed to see Shayna. Am I saying her name right? Shayna, yeah, whatever she is.
Yeah, we'll find out when Marvel pronounces it on the big screen.
Yeah, when that pops back out again.
Right.
You're supposed to see that that character sort of come back again. So the interesting thing about what they're doing with Conan is he's going to be going with the Serpent Crown coming up soon. So it has nothing to do with the series that's currently out, even though the series that's out is called what is it called, like Serpent Chase, Serpent Circle, whatever it is, the one that Serpent Age or whatever.
Okay.
So I wrote to Saladin Ahmed, who's doing the next series of the Serpent Crown, the chase with Conan, and there's a great cover with Mephisto behind Conan and rolling dice on the thing. I'll talk about that in a minute. And he says the series have nothing to do with one another. So I'm kind of happy about that, because this is a series that's taking place in the Robert E. Howard pulp age, the one out now. The one coming up, I think, is going to really put Damnation very much back on the radars again. That's a series I've talked about that has a lot of little things buried in there and a lot of great variant covers. I think when you see that Midnight Suns come back again in some form, those covers, those connecting Greg Smallwood's covers I've shown before. But anyway, the Serpent Crown is something that that Conan has encountered before, but he encountered it in Savage Sword of Conan. If you look it up, it says issue 40. I read through issue 40. It's not in there at all. In issue 41, he actually finds something called the Cobra Crown. And now, I'm fascinated by this kind of stuff. So I went back and I looked up this Cobra Crown, and the Cobra Crown was a creation by Set and also Thoth Amin, who was sort of, again, a god that Conan has faced a lot. We've seen him facing Kulan Gath in the Marvel Universe. Thoth Aman, I think is how you pronounce it. He's the one who's chasing this sort of Cobra Crown, and the Cobra Crown I call sort of the Serpent Crown light. But but it has all the same sort of control powers, just to a lesser extent. So as we see Conan start to get into this thing with the upcoming Serpent Crown, this is a book you may want to look for. It's cheap and it has a beautiful cover. This Norum cover that I'm gonna have to find. And I literally did a video earlier today and I had it on there, but here we go. So here's this cover. Yeah, so this is one of those great, these were like beautiful copy, and I think $8. And these, again,
gorgeous.
If you like I live in New York City, so I go through the magazine boxes all the time, and these are all over the place. Like these Savage Sword of Conan's, like just the beautiful covers. Also, as you're looking through there, you'll see these magazine-sized Frazetta covers buried in there. You'll see all of these like classic Vallejo covers in there. These are the artists that I'm grabbing these books, and you want to get them in beautiful condition, and they're tough to find. And I think just like those foreign language comics, to go back to our banner that we're flying below, these are the books that there are niche followers of these sort of books, and these books were read by these Conan books. Who was reading these giant sized magazine books? It wasn't kids bearing these up. It was a lot of like they had bodices ripped open, and they had a lot of like really ultra violence. So these were being bought up by that teenage to adult audience. And a lot of these guys have kept these beautiful, pristine copies, and now they're getting rid of these copies. And I find them all the time in these boxes that people sold collections back. So I'd be looking for those as you start to hunt through as well. And as I do, and as I tend to do, Nico, I just sort of circle around in my head where I'm trapped in a constant like, oh, what do I want to buy? Oh, I'm gonna grab that. I'm gonna grab that. But
you like my new banner?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. That's perfect. I love it. All 7 of you who are out there. Or I can't see the thing anymore. But I wanted to show a picture because I did.
Can we talk a little bit about that? So I think that's important if you're new to the hobby, or if you're just looking for a way to make some extra money. That's very cool.
Yeah, that's for that Cobra Crown from there. Yeah.
I love magazine boxes, or where I go early, if not first, early when I get to a new shop. When I'm looking at shows, I always make sure to hit magazine boxes. You find stuff there you may never, ever in a million years get that kind of a deal on, because people just don't go there.
And people don't want to store them.
Right. Warrior magazines
yeah.
are hard to store. They're oversized. Regular magazines are hard to store. I've found like the old TMNTs, like the Raphael specials, unbagged, unboarded. People just feel like, what? I'm like, what is this? How much is this? They're like, I don't know. Is that worth a lot of money? I'm like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, you could find like Rick and Morty Treasury editions in there. I found a lot of like what the early sci-fi book that didn't really take off, Odyssey, I think, which had a Frazetta cover on it. Issue 1. Maybe I'm coming up, or maybe Omni Odyssey. I forget what it is. And then the problem is
the last Galactus story.
Oh yeah,
I've been looking for recently because I like it.
Even going off the comic range, like Spy Magazine. If you don't know Spy Magazine, anyone listening out there, so Spy Magazine was a New York-based magazine that was very much about celebrity, like parody, and there's a great cover out there that sort of shows Hillary Clinton with a Marilyn Monroe skirt blowing up underneath, and as you look, she has a penis. That's a cover. There are tons of Trump covers from Spy Magazine back when it was out, and there are these, they
don't
really
forget about National Lampoon's mags.
Yeah, very much.
So many great covers there. Jimmy did a hell of kind of like a series of articles, or at least an article that talks about when which issues are the John Hughes issues. There's of course the famous
buy this or I'll shoot this dog.
I'll shoot the dog.
Yeah,
brilliant. I mean, all those books are, 1, resellable, and 2, generally I think underappreciated, undervalued, even though the like John Hughes issues, obviously like a $20 mid-grade kind of book, and the I'll Kill Your Dog issue is like a $50 to $100 mid-grade book. if not a lot higher when you start talking about high grade copies. I think there's just money to be made across the board in oversized magazine. Know the covers that are a win.
Yeah, even recently, the like that Amber Blake, right, when they came out with those Catherine Naudet, the 1 to 10, the issue
Winner,
1
winner,
variant.
chicken dinner.
And so
I like the Afterlife with Archie
those
variant.
are all.
I almost bought one today.
Yeah, and you know what? Buy a
I
magazine.
saw it on my
box.
buddy's wall, and I'm like, I know he'll have that later. He's probably watching now, like, this cheap bastard. I'm gonna make sure I never sell it to him for not taking it today.
Yeah, I
great book.
I'm of two mindsets. I'm the biggest fan of like I love Sabrina. I had like that. I had something commissioned by Jen Bartel of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I love like Afterlife with Archie, the Vampironica, the early stuff, the 261, 262 issues where she was introduced along with Betty the Vampire Slayer. The Stadium Comics homages of the Archie stuff. Like, I'm a huge Archie fan. I'm just not sure that I don't know what they're doing, because it looks like Riverdale has become the adult Archie property, which sort of makes Afterlife with Archie not needed. Like, I know they've done little Easter eggs and asides, and but
yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, you would think with the streaming service like this.
Well, you'd think with Aguilera. Yeah. I mean, that was his. That's where he started.
Yeah,
that was his book. It gave him a start. How do you not? And now he's in charge of the TV universe. I'm like, is this real life? Is this guy not going to do this?
Yeah, that's
maybe not. I mean, there was like the breadcrumbs at like a SDCC, like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that all goes. It would be a damn shame for them not to do it, but I'm like you. The longer that we get away from it, the less likely I think it is to happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
And the only thing working for that, right, is just they need content to fill up all these streaming sites that are gunning at one another and coming for one another. So that's why I say everything. And we talk about this all the time. There are no more like give your box to like Salvation Army. Take all these boxes, pull your number ones out and just put them alphabetically in order, because they're getting optioned at some point. They may not get made, but they're getting optioned because they're pulling properties out. They're going back. They're looking. A lot of those boom books are crazy today. I did a video on a lot of the kids' books, especially from Kaboom, when Kaboom was out.
Speaking of places to look when you go to shops and it shows kids' books, winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Yeah, I was talking about everything today from going back to the DuckTales and the Tailspin, and now those Disney Afternoon comics. Some of the later issues are really starting to heat up, and that's all because Disney Plus is back, and you're hearing all this about Gargoyles coming back and this coming back, and those kids books. I have sections of those. I've been waiting for Mouse Guard to make its reappearance. Once Disney Plus, they're going to make it a streaming series. I know it's going to come. I'm not going to, but that's another book very tough to store. People are inherently lazy. Comic boxes come in one basic size. Oh, I don't want to buy a magazine box and then buy the magazine bag and then buy the magazine board. I see it when I get magazines shipped to me. Like, people can barely, they buy bags that are too big, or they put them in a Ziploc bag with like some cardboard behind it. They don't even want to buy the bags, and they're selling the books. So I'm always looking for those off-size books. And I just, I tend to store, people used to really rail on me and say, how are you storing your books flat in stacks? And what I do is I stack and then stack the opposite way, and then stack so I go 10 books, stack spine way, 10 books, stack spine the other way. I stack them up and I put a heavier book on top of them. And I can tell you, my books stay in pristine condition doing it that way. There are no spine rolls, no spine bends, as long as you're stacking them and they're equal size books. So my Mouse Guards I've stored like that instead of, because there's no square box that's fitting those. I could put them in a magazine box, I guess, but it just works for me to store them like that as well.
So since I've got you here, let me ask you, you've been watching The Watchmen?
I have, but now I have to say that I know you were talking about it. I had to turn you off the other day because I heard you start talking about Watchmen and I left the room. I'm up to I'm up to episode 5. So my wife, why? And the reason is because my wife is watching it and she's a slower binger. Like, we get to the second episode and her eyes start to sort of, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to save that for, I guess we'll watch that while I'll watch The Mandalorian tonight,
You're watching The Mandalorian?
I've been all the way up to. I only haven't seen tonight's episode, which I'll watch when. Yeah, I've been out from 7:30 watching soccer today, and but I'm saving that up once I'm off with you.
Are you shocked that we've not seen any spike at all in either Watchmen ones or the Star Wars Boba Fett issues?
Totally, and I think it's worrying me a little when I start thinking about the Disney Plus Marvel series. Because if we're seeing quality series on
Real
HBO,
quality, right?
And like Watchmen, it's as I said, are they considering it a companion piece, right? Is that what they're calling this specifically, a companion piece?
Yeah,
I guess. And The Mandalorian, which is somebody came up with a great thing. It's sort of like, obviously we made the Lone Wolf and Cub comparisons earlier, which it very much was like, and I grabbed a 9 because I love that series anyway. So I grabbed a cheap 9.8 of issue 1,
nice.
the first American edition of it. But to me, that's like he's traveling from town to town and helping out. That's what this series is, right? That's what it's going to be. Yeah, it's that perfect. It's like when Brian Banner, Robert Banner used to travel, not Bruce Banner, used to travel from town to town, and it was an anthology sort of.
Go on adventures and shit, as Jules from Pulp Fiction described it. Like Kane from Kung Fu.
Yeah, just traveling the world and seeing what's coming up next. But the other thing I wanted to bring up was, speaking of shows coming out, did you hear about the footage that came out on Eternals and the footage that came out?
So I read was it a Deadline article?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, the Deadline bit, and they called it gorgeous, huh?
Yeah, this is I think the interesting thing to come out of there again is that we're hearing is the deviants look much more human than the deviants of the books, and the only reason I've really been following that a little is because I've been reading a little back stuff on the deviants, but some people are saying it's making that perfect segue to where where it's going, right? From deviants to mutants, right? So that will be
no
Marvel's.
question about it.
Yeah, that'll be Marvel's plan through. And then, of course, they're going to try to relaunch, because they're not going to let Inhumans sort of fester and sit there, right? They're not going to let that. Marvel's not going to let that big failure just sort of like, it's sort of that fart in the room. They're going to figure out a way to get Inhumans introduced in a big way and have them come back in a way. And I think thinking of Kamala Khan again, she's that sort of inroads to Inhumans. Use her and then backtrack it, right? Because
and the Eternals links into all of the werewolf stuff, or all of the vampire stuff too, right?
Yeah. Those linking, it's funny. The more I'm reading the back issue stuff, because I was actually talking to somebody, and we're talking about how Thor Odin Force was one of the books that was just re-released recently. So I went back to read a little bit about the Odin Force, and then I was reading back a little bit about how, you've been seeing a lot with Thor talking about the Devourer, right? This is going to be coming up in Kate's run coming through, and people immediately thought to Galactus and started thinking about that range. And I looked back to sort of, when did Galactus and Thor when did they interact? And actually
163, 168, 169, I think.
So you have that Journey into Mystery, the awesome Galactus tale, and you have in that Galactus story, we only find a little bit about what happened to Galactus's people, right? And that was that creeping plague, right? And we keep hearing Donny Cates say, has anyone ever done any more with this concept that Kirby really explored in there? And I'm really thinking about, he's going to go into the origins of this creeping plague that killed all of the people of
and for example, Cates, look, for all of the flack that people give him and this, that, and the other, he's a student of comics, which I love. And this is a guy who, because apparently most people aren't. No one talked about the fact, or at least for any length of time, that Cates deliberately chose the Punisher, because in Fantastic Four 74, there was a Herald of Galactus called the Punisher, not Frank Castle. But Cates went and did that.
As a little, again, as an Easter egg for someone who's reading books and not someone who's buying books.
Who's loved comics for fucking 30 years, 40 years, 20 years, and like Cates went back and read books from 20 years before he started. But I I like a guy who's a student of comics writing comics. That's beautiful to me. It doesn't get much better than that.
Well, we've talked before. You have the renaissance of the writing, right? The three we spoke about before, and I think Al Ewing is really like he was the brainchild of that Marvel 1000, Marvel 1001, the incoming stuff coming through, and now with Hickman over in his little corner in his playground over there doing his stuff, like
couldn't be better.
So it's for me, and what's interesting also is Cates gets flack. One, because he's a master showman and he likes to use Twitter to his advantage. And if you want to play the game, he's going to play the game with you.
Social media, which I think is funny.
And of course, Rich, if anyone doesn't know, Donnie Cates and Rich Johnston know each other very well. Rich Johnston from Bleeding Cool. And that's why all these Cates articles were popping up all the time. And Cates has even defended Rich Johnston, saying, oh, he's not a bad guy or whatever. So they know each other. But I think what's interesting is Null will not be showing up in this Thor series at all. And people are like, oh, he's just going to throw Null in again. It's going to be the same thing. He's made a very clear thing saying Null is not popping up here. He's like, Null is in the Venom sandbox. He is not going to be in the Thor sandbox. And just looking at the Thor cover and seeing the runes that he's wearing and knowing that also he's going to be featuring in that series a lot from the Journey into Mystery. Sif, Lady Sif is going to be popping up. She's going to be a major part of this series. I think she's one of those characters, interesting character, one of those sort of peripheral, secondary characters, beautiful. Those Journey into Mystery covers I've spoken about before at the end of that run. They had beautiful Jeff Deckel covers, and then they had these really gorgeous, impossible to find high ratio variant covers of the final like five issues of that series. That I think that Lady Sif character is really interesting. We've seen only bits and pieces pop up of her, but she's one of those characters who Boulder the Brave. Now I'm gonna go not Boulder. Who am I talking about? Oh, Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill and Sif have a relationship in the comics. So maybe when we say Beta Ray Bill, when we see him coming out, I think he's going to be popping up in that Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't think you're going to see Adam Warlock. I think Beta Ray Bill is the next character that you're seeing coming in. I can't promise his books are going to shoot up. We saw a Nebula. Nothing happened to her book.
You ready, buddy?
Here we go.
I might have to reel back too far. But I bought one today. I bought two first appearances of Beta Ray Bill in the last 3 weeks.
And
I pay $40 a piece for them.
Yeah. Well,
they're 9 4s, 9 6s, maybe 9 8s on a really great day.
To me, that's this book, right? That's the same as this book again, over and over again, right? I'm not sure.
You're not paying $40 for those books, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Let me tell you, never for these. And again, people keep saying, my daughter was watching it. She's like, she was fascinated with Nebula. Like, Nebula is a fascinating character. She's going to have a solo series, like a solo mini coming up. There's a couple of great covers for that series. To me, you have to know.
Well, she's going to stick around. Gamora's gone.
Oh yeah, right? She's absolutely going to be around.
Nebula's here to stay, and they've got to do something interesting with her.
Yeah, I just don't think. I don't think I think they did something interesting with her. I mean, if her books don't spike with the storyline they gave her and the redemption arc they gave her, I can't see that kind of book ever. That's one of those cyclical books that you just hang on and you hope something happens for a little while.
Guardians movie.
Say again.
How do they not do something with her in the new Guardians movie?
Well, you would think she's going to pop up in there. You would think that like she has to be a favorite sort of James Gunn, right? Coming back through, like he's the one who really developed it out. I think we're all throwing darts in the dark. Like I hear it's 7 different people being put out there. And to me, it's like
Guardians of the Galaxy. I think I mentioned this on Tuesday. Is the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to like spec books. There's fucking 24 that have allegedly, don't worry, it's going to be this thing, or don't worry, it's going to be this thing. Quasar.
Yeah. Your Wendell Vaughn, Phi Lavelle, Captain Marvel. You got everything going on now. Novar Marvel Boy,
the villains.
Yeah. across the board. It's like I say, Thor: God of Thunder is the spec book. Like, has there ever been a 25-issue series that has yielded more like spec gold from the variants to first appearances? Like I used to find those just floating in the Thor bins, right, and just pull them out. And even going back again now, the Jane Foster Thor stuff has cooled off a little. There's some beautiful variants to be pulling out of boxes
again. I
again.
picked up What If 10 today.
Yeah,
for nothing. It's gorgeous. I picked one up that I had pressed. I was lucky enough to sell that book at the peak. I have no idea how the market has let it collapse. Only because Natalie Portman is a mega star.
Yeah,
and little girls are going to be running around with fucking hammers. They're not going to kill her in one movie. I mean, she ain't dying from cancer.
No, she's not.
Right? Not going to happen. So,
and I don't think they go the Valkyrie route, right? Because they want to have that other Valkyrie that they developed in Thor Ragnarok. So I don't think they'll have Jane Foster become Valkyrie. So
no, they're gonna. I mean, she'll be here to stay.
Yeah, she was in an Avengers run over there. So you bring, who knows? Maybe you have the Falcon and Winter Soldier evolves into something else, and maybe you see the Falcon leading an Avengers team as Captain America with a female Thor, with eventually, don't forget, even in that
it makes more sense than doing like A-Force proper, which nobody really wants to fucking see.
No, I don't think. And again, talking about books that probably get too much love, A-Force 1, the Singularity variant, right? The Stephanie Hans, beautiful cover, but who cares? Who's Singularity?
I don't know. I can't sell that book. I've had it on my eBay for I can't even tell you how long.
But it's one of those books, and now I'm thinking, I'm starting to think about what are we coming up with next wave? Like, where's Marvel going next? So we talked about incoming. I can't help but think about that Infinity Watch. Like, I think they're going to go the Thunderbolts route with the Infinity Stones, right? Because so far we've seen two people get those Infinity Stones. We've seen Miguel Batista get it in the Wolverine Infinity Watch, where he gets the Time Stone, and then he disappears off with his new costume. And then we see Star at the end of that Captain Marvel and about to launch off, and now she's going to be trained by the Scarlet Witch in this Star series.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
And it's two anti-heroes. So the other four went off into space, and I'm starting to think about, well, who are those other sort of characters they're trying to redeem? I'm thinking probably Richard Rider's brother, Robert Rider, the Nova's brother, who now is like the evil Darkhawk Talon. He's probably the perfect character to get one of those stones because he's been trying to get the amulet. So that's a character that I'm like, oh, when did that character first show up? So I start to think about where are these things going to show up? Where's Marvel going? Like you want to be a step ahead of not the writers, but of the people who are buying the books that they saw on the top 10 list. Like yesterday, you and I are selling those books when we get around to it because we're too lazy to do that anyway. But theoretically, we're selling those books on a parallel, on another multiverse thing.
I'm working on getting me some part-time help on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, like coming in, sorting books, selling, sort them, list them, sell them, get them out the door.
I have free child labor in the house. I'm trying to get in here.
Dude, I'm
trying, but I know it's late, Nico. I know.
You got to rock and roll. It is late. I got a teleconference really at 8:00 in the morning on a Sunday morning. So, let's do this again.
I'm always happy.
Have, I believe, gosh, is next weekend? I think next weekend is it next weekend? Oh man, I think Dinesh is next weekend.
Oh wow, you're gonna have Dinesh. I know that should be.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that.
I'll be in the chat room, being ignored in the chat room, Nico.
And then Mikey Halperin from Heritage, we've got him. I think Dan. What's his name? Dan. I don't know. Dan reads lots of comic books. Dan used to be on that podcast.
Oh, Dan Piercy.
Dan Piercy, yeah. Dan's got his own YouTube show now. He was going to come on, and we were going to rap. I was pretty excited about that.
Oh, that is very
I'm trying to think who else we're going to have in the upcoming weeks. But what I want to do is try to have a more solid presence on Saturday and Sunday. I am looking to get the channel up and moving at least twice a week. and all of the like today's new books. This is the shitty news that came out this week. Stuff on Tuesdays really doesn't let me kind of delve into the things that I want to talk about.
To do a deeper dive,
Yeah, not that that stuff's not important, not that I don't learn a lot, because, you know, Jimmy and John both teach me about things that I wouldn't otherwise know about. Just that these other sorts of conversations are the ones that I also enjoy and can maybe add a little bit more to, or at least kind of facilitate, you know, independently. So I'm hoping to continue to do more and more of this, and I hope you'll be a part of that. Thank you, as always, for your insights, my friend.
No, thank you.
It means the world to me.
Yeah, I'm always happy to come on and be able to actually talk one-on-one, because, you know, in my own videos, I just do solo things, and they sort of just, I just sort of ramble on and on. So it's nice to have someone to sort of bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, I like to rewind your videos because I can't write fast enough. I take notes on these podcasts. Like most people think they're all canned, and I'm like, well, actually, this is just for me.
Imagine how my students
these were things I learned.
Yeah.
From a podcast.
I try to slow down.
There's
and
this stuff at one point in time.
Yeah, I can see the Zorn stuff on there. I see.
Yeah, see.
Yeah,
I don't know what any of that shit is.
I try to slow it down. New York style. You know, that's how we get. You got to get it out there quickly, otherwise it's.
These are recent notes that I.
This is great. I'll be screenshotting those. I'm going to screenshot all those notes after, so I know what to go back and see. All right,
have a good one, my friend.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night, and thanks for our listeners.